Here we go. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 22nd meeting for the Board of Selectmen. Will everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item we have tonight is the change of the manager at California Pizza Kitchen, but she has not arrived yet, so we will skip over that and see if she shows up. Secondly, we're going to talk about a proposed bylaw change banning seating of minors at bar property in restaurants and clubs. Tom, did you want to get up and speak about that, please? Tom Mullen, Town Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members.
Good evening.
So the concept here is to...
Tom, is your microphone on?
Oh, sorry. Good evening. So the concept here is to simply make sure that at restaurants and clubs where there is a bar, that minors are not allowed to sit at the bar. And I think that there are probably two ways that we could accomplish this purpose. One is that your board, as the alcohol licensing authority in Lynnfield, could pass a regulation to that effect. Another is to adopt a general bylaw to that effect, and I have drafted a general bylaw which is before you. I think as between the two, generally the stronger way to proceed is using a bylaw. You go to town meeting, it's the legislature for the town.
Mm-hmm.
As I've been thinking about it, I see no downside, given that we may get some pushback from at least one licensee and may end up, who knows, seeing a legal challenge. I see no downside in using a belt and suspenders approach and both going to town meeting, getting approval for it as a bylaw, and then asking your board to approve it as a regulation. The one risk of proceeding to town meeting is that conceivably we might lose. Now, it's not a zoning bylaw, so it doesn't require a 2/3 vote. It only requires a majority vote.
Mm-hmm.
I find it hard to believe that you're going to get a majority in opposition to something as unobjectionable as this. But if you did, and then you were to adopt it as a regulation, we might see, again, the dissident licensee claiming that, well, this is something you should have done as a bylaw and you failed. I don't think that that argument would work because it's clear that as a liquor licensing board, you have the authority to have reasonable regulations. I don't see anything unreasonable about this at all. In fact, I think you could probably impose this a third way, which is as a condition imposed on licenses that you issue in the future. Now, I think this is cleaner using a bylaw or a bylaw and a regulation because I wouldn't want to get into whether any licensee has developed some kind of rights in his license such that if you were to retroactively, or not retroactively, but now impose a new condition, you might say, well, there's no basis for that. You're taking away something of value.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend that this proposed new bylaw, which would be Chapter 195 of the general bylaws, be included in the warrant for the next annual town meeting, and that if, as I expect and hope, it is passed, that you as a board in your capacity as the liquor licensing authority also adopt it as a regulation.
Well, thank you, Tom. What you had mentioned at the end there under number 4, enforcement, he talks about suspension and revocation of the offender's liquor license. It doesn't talk about non-renewal. Okay, and that's exactly what you just talked about. It may be also a condition for renewal of a license.
Well, you could, and as I said, I would urge you to stay away from trying to impose it as a condition because I think it's we would open ourselves to the argument that the licensee has developed some kind of property right or interest in the license as it was, and now you're changing it all of a sudden.
Right.
And changing it for them, but not necessarily for all others. If, on the other hand, you make it a bylaw or a bylaw and a regulation, it's clear that it's applicable across the board, and all liquor licensees know or should know that whatever property right they have in their license, it is always subject to reasonable regulation.
Right. Great. Well, I appreciate that, and I know we had prior discussions with many of the restaurant owners in the entire town, and of course the majority are up here. And as you stated, all but one pretty much comply with us now, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what brought it up. And Dick, if you'd like to speak to it, I know this is originally proposed by Selectman Dalton. So if you want to talk about it, Dick, that'd be happy.
Well, I'd just like to say that, for someone who's been in the business for 40 years and operated restaurants from New Hampshire down to Florida, it seems only reasonable to me, both as an operator and as a patron of a restaurant, that the bar stools at a bar are for adults and they're not for minors. And this was all brought about by one particular licensee. We brought together all the licensees, myself and the town administrator, talked to them, and they were all, except that one, they all said that as a matter of practice, they did not allow it. The only, I think, legitimate concern brought up by the other operators were the ones with high tops in the bar area. And our response, Rob and I, was we weren't talking about high tops in the bar area. We're talking about bar stools at the bar. And again, so all but one licensee agreed to it, but with that dissident, it forces us to come to a regulation, which I'm not really that happy about. Again, having been an operator, I think operators should just act responsibly and not need a board of selectmen or whomever micromanaging their business. But in this case, I think it is necessary. So I have one question, Tom. It seems as if what you were saying is the best alternative is go to town meeting, have a bylaw enacted, and then do a regulation. Why couldn't we do the regulation theoretically right now and then do the bylaw? Is there a...
Oh, you could.
Okay.
Yeah. You could.
And if we were to do a regulation, then we would call a public hearing on that as the licensing authority, or how would that...
let me look into the mechanics of that. I'm not sure whether you would need to post or publish notice, and if so, how often or for how long. But I'll let the town administrator know that.
Because, Mr. Chairman, I would like to see it come before us as soon as possible, and if that means a regulation followed by a bylaw at the town meeting, that would be my preference individually.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we should do both. And if there's no particularly pecking order, I think we could obviously do that before town meeting. Would the wording of a regulation look different than what we have in front of us?
I would draft something for you,
Yeah.
but it would be substantially identical.
Is that something you could have for our next meeting?
Oh, sure.
Possibly? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and Chris, you have any input on this, please?
No, I would agree with Selectman Dalton. This is a really common sense piece. I think we would expect all establishments like this to adhere to this, but sometimes with common sense you have to take it upon ourselves as a board of selectmen to make sure that all adhere to this piece. So tonight, so we're going to look at just adding it to town meeting, the warrant tonight, and then look at the regulation at the next meeting. Is that the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
Just one more follow-up question, if you would. So on the posting, this is always, as an operator, something that drove me crazy, because you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on beautiful bars, then you have all these posters that the local town, insist are, that you have to have up. In order for this to take effect and be enforceable, do we have to post at each bar? I mean, just one more ugly sign up there that...
No, you don't. I mean, I put that in because
it's standard.
because I think it would be wise, but certainly there is no legal requirement that in passing a bylaw or a regulation of this kind that we require the licensee to post notice that minors aren't allowed there.
Any comments from the public? No? All right, Chris, I'll take a motion then.
I move that the board vote to direct the town administrator to include the proposed bylaw in the annual town meeting warrant.
Second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the extension of the Reading Municipal Light Department 20-year agreement. Town Administrator.
Sure. The Reading Municipal Light has asked us to extend our agreement, which is currently 10 years to go in that agreement, to the additional max of 10 years to create a new 20-year agreement. My 2 years and John Tomaz could support this. We have found Reading Municipal Light to be affordable, to be responsive, to be good communicators, to be on top of, particularly in my tenure, some major windstorms, in ice storms. I see no reason not to recommend that Reading Municipal Light be extended for an additional 10 years and that be brought to town meeting.
Thank you. I agree. This is, we have an original agreement here from 1990, which is signed by Selectman Redmond and Selectman Donegan back then. Can't read the third name. I don't know what the third one is. Maybe Bob would know. But then there's no substantial or any changes to the agreement. We're just extending the existing agreement. Okay, great. Anything from my board members? No. I'll take a motion then.
I move that the board vote to direct the town administrator and town council to review the proposed extension and direct the town administrator to include an article that it would approve the extension on the annual town meeting warrant.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Dave
Is that
Drizzling.
Dave?
Dave Drizzling.
I thought so.
He's got penmanship like me.
He's got to work on that signature still.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is our fiscal year 21 budget presentation by the DPW. DPW Director John Tomaz is here to make that presentation. John, welcome.
Thank you very much. I have just a handout for you before I get started. I think this may kind of simplify things for you as far as what I'm up to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's probably best to start from the bottom and work our way up. And the bottom being the bottom line, I'm looking for a 1.7% increase in my total budget. And what you see above that, it kind of reflects where the increases are and where some of the deductions are going to be. A couple things I'd like to point out is that when I do my budget, I look at what we spent the past 5 years on each line item for each vendor. So I got a real good feel about what we probably will spend this year, or whether we have one-time expenses for something that I'm never going to see again. So those deductions, again, reflect what I consider to be an actual amount that I will probably need for that line item. The risk in that is that those of us spend, I think, a little bit high to cover sometimes what we have in snow and ice, which I always exceed my budget. Mm-hmm. So what I've done is kind of taken that fluff out. So again, that's something where you may want to discuss whether you want to keep those lines into kind of as a buffer for the snow and ice, or just leave them as is. What I'll do is I'll start and go from the top on down.
Sure.
Now the first one, again, salaries. First three are just salaries for the three. First one, again, for town buildings, 1.8%. Again, it reflects I went 1.5% for everybody, but also there were some stipends, there was some longevity, there's clothing, so those are all included in there also. That's why everything isn't 1.5%. Building salaries, again, that ended up being 4.18%, but with that, that's all the custodians in all the buildings, 21 altogether. And with that, again, I have 5 people who are getting essentially step raises, which it's very unusual to have that many at once. So that's why that is more than the 1.5%. Again, with those other items I just mentioned too. And the last one, again, DPW salaries, that's exactly at 2%, which includes, again, 1.5 plus everything else. So I'm moving on down. The town building operations, no change in that. What was there last year is there this year. Now, for the school operations, the one big change there is school buses. If you remember last year, I came in and we had gone out to bid, and I put in 3% increase for that. It actually came in at 15%, so it was much higher than we had anticipated. So this number here reflects kind of what that number is, plus the contract for this year too. So that's why that is kind of the bump there of $44,000 reflects, again, what I project to be the actual cost for buses for next year. But overall, for school operations, comes down to about $23,000 when you include all the deductions for some of those line items, which again I feel very comfortable with. I can live with on those. Moving down to DP. Any questions on that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just quickly, on the school bus contracts, those are the leases that we have on
Yes.
those contracts, right?
Yes.
Is it still much to our benefit, or do we have the analysis if it's still to our benefit to do it this way?
I would say yes. We're having a hard time hiring a third bus driver, so I can imagine trying to get, 10 buses out every day with backup people also. And the nice part about having North Suburban is that, one of our folks don't show up, they supply another bus, so it does make our life easier too.
Great.
On the DPW operations, there is 2 things that I increased. One is drain repairs. What that reflects is that, again, with all this NIPTs and such like that, we clean our storm drains every year. In the old days, we would just store it in our yard. We can't do that anymore. We have to properly dispose of it at a special landfill. So that's why I increased that account right there. The other is tree maintenance reflects. Again, every year I've kind of increased that because every year I seem to be spending more and more. And to give you an idea on that is that we had that windstorm, which you had mentioned earlier. That was a $20,000 cost for the tree account to clear up all those trees there. So it's like it doesn't take long to burn through $40,000, $50,000, or $60,000. God bless you. But overall, if you include again the decreases, the budget was increased $2,558 for DPW operations. Snow and ice again, I kept that the same, but I included there. I got $120 in my budget for the past 3 years. It's been $333, $478, and $441. You can see we normally exceed that. I mean, right now the budget does have, exclude my budget, there is some extra money in there to cover that. There's $275 there, plus what I have. Plus if we go above that, those two, then I start eating into my budget. So that's the risk again, as I mentioned, about cutting back on some of those line items that I had there. So no change there. Trash and collection, again, these increases reflect the contract amounts that we have to pay, including the $1 a ton more we're paying for recyclables, or solid waste, I should say. On the recyclables, right now we're paying $25 a ton. Our contract with JRM expires at the end of June of next year. Now, right now, towns are paying anywhere from $75 to $100 a ton for their recyclables. So looking ahead, if we assume that we still have, collecting recyclables, you're looking at about another $1.25 to $1.50 increase just to dispose of recyclables if the market doesn't change. Now, I think you might have said in the Globe a couple of weeks ago, had an article about how some towns are just doing away with recycling. It's actually more expensive to recycle than to just toss it in the trash. I mean, when I came here, you were paying nothing. Probably the 2 years before I was here, you were making money on it. So the market has just completely fallen out with India and China, essentially taking nothing. They want perfect material, which is almost impossible to do. So that's why I'm just kind of getting that out there now. And of course, a little side note to that, and we do have the recycling committee. And I think I mentioned when I was here about a month or two ago that we're looking to kind of just improve what we have right now as far as when we take yard waste, the cardboard, maybe some other things. So we're kind of working on that to try to make it a little more convenient for the residents there also. And one thing I may ask you to consider is that right now we allow the collection of bulk items for free. And there's some items which you may want to start charging even $5 or $10 for. So just to kind of recoup that cost. And that also helps us to get money from the DEP. They have certain grants out there which, again, if you meet certain criteria for your recycling efforts, you get money on. So that's something that we'll probably come to you at some point down the road for.
So John, in your budget, you have recycling this year, 129,000. That cover, that covers just the recycling piece.
Yeah,
So we're talking about that going up at least 150,000
for next year, yes.
just for next year alone.
For not next year, for 2020, be 2000.
A year and a half.
Yeah, year and a half.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Wow. Okay.
And then at the very bottom, as I say, you kind of have a summary of what we have this year and what we have, what I propose for next year, which comes out to the roughly 1.7%.
Great. Excellent. Any other questions from the board?
No.
No.
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Campbell.
My issue, as it has been before, is buses. Last year, school maintenance and buses cost $3,175,288. How much of that was buses? How much are the buses going to cost, either last year or this year? Because I know you leased
I believe the buses are about $730,000.
700.
That's just for the North Suburban. We have our own. We
buses.
still lease 2 buses, which cost us $35,000 a year to lease both buses. We have 2 more payments left on those.
Right. So we have, I think, 15 buses. At least that's what I count.
If you used every bus, yes.
We don't use every bus.
No.
Some of them are not repaired or
Some of them are backups. Plus, we have 2 smaller buses, which are special needs buses.
specials needs. Right. So, how many buses are generally in operation?
Usually 10 go out.
10. Okay, so we have 4 schools and we have 10 buses that are going out regularly on school days. I have pointed out for years, and many people have noticed in town, that there are very few people on the buses. Why? Why do we have so many buses with just 4 schools and they're not full? There's only 7 or 8 pupils sometimes on a bus. I just don't see a full one. And I know the school board has something to say about it, right? You don't.
Mrs. Campbell,
that
I've been waiting for
determination.
this question for the past year from you because
Yeah,
I
it's
knew
been
it
at
was
least
coming at
5
some
years
point.
even before you came.
No, I have. What they do is that actually we get from the school what kids are on each route. So even though you may see 8 kids on a bus on a certain day, the school may tell us at the start that there could be 25 to 30. So that's what we have to go by. What the school tells us, the parents tell the school that these kids need a bus ride, and that's how we schedule the buses. So even though you may see only 8 or 10 or 12, we have to base ours on what we're told how many kids are going to be in the bus.
Do you ever have a
I-
bus that has 25 kids on it?
That I don't know.
You don't know? I've
I'm
sworn I'm going to
Well,
stand
I think
out.
the challenge is legal requirements also to provide the bus, whether a student takes that bus or not, there still has to be a seat on that bus.
A
for that
seat on the
student.
bus.
So it's certainly, I know the school board has that challenge, but they have to meet those requirements.
Well, it's good that the parents know that what information they give, because we all know there's large lines of parents, whether it's at the high school or the elementary school or the middle school. We've all been caught in that traffic one time or another, that it costs a lot of money for us to run the buses. It causes air pollution. It causes the expenditure of gas, which is under the energy. So where are the buses in the summer? Because they disappear in the summer. They disappear on weekends. Where are they going?
Well, a lot of the buses are used by the recreation department. I mean, literally, I would say probably every day at least one bus goes out. It may not be the bigger buses, but it could be the smaller buses. I mean, very often. Plus, there's also sports teams that go out. That people have actually rented our buses before. We supplied one for a sports team who paid for the buses. So I think it's very rare for a bus not to go out during the whole year. But it'd be very unusual to have 3 or 4 going out during the summer. But again, and for that list, I can give you that list of the bus routes and how many kids are supposedly on it and on each bus if you want to see that too.
Sure. I appreciate your openness. Does the recreation department pay for buses that they use? Because they charge people for the trips, right? So do they pay for that? And the athletic teams, they pay to participate, right, on the athletic teams? Does that come out of an athletic budget? Do they reimburse you for that? Well, there's a couple of points. Thank you.
Okay, John, you want to go over capital?
Sure.
Thanks.
As usual, I have a lot of requests. I understand a lot of them probably won't be met, and I understand why. But a couple of them again, kind of just a couple of them are placeholders, just so it's out there. You recognize that maybe at some point you will have to do something. But of course, the key ones are some of the things that are required to do by the state. For example, NIPTs. I'll go through a couple right here. Again, one of them here, the storage area for the street sweepings. Again, besides the catch basin cleaners, we also now do street sweepings, twice. Again, part of our NIPT's requirement. We have to store it a certain way. We have to dispose of it a certain way. So that's what that's about. I mean, this is one of those we're looking to expand our yard area a little bit. So that's what that request is for.
So this the one you're referring to is the first.
It's for $40,000. Fund for development.
No,
Oh,
it's
I'm
so
sorry.
it's-
Why don't you tell me which ones you have there? That'd probably be best.
We have one for 80 at first, yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
first one.
that's Danny's. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, that's just again working on year 3 for our NIPTs. This is above and beyond. We have to document all of our sources of pollution or culverts. Things we just have to do to meet our NIPTs requirements. There's probably about 5 or 6 different requirements we need to do. There's a couple of them there. You have find discharge and limitation plan. Best management practices, which again applies to us, and also some developers for an acre or more areas there. Annual reporting, screening of outfalls, as I say, just trying to detect if there is some sort of sewage leaking into the outfalls, which get to our drinking water or any sort of water source out there.
So, John, the 80,000. This is, as I read the write-up, I'm a little bit confused as to is it for professional services that the 80 is spent?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the second one on our list.
The second one is
the
one I
40.
mentioned first
It's
here
the
about
40,
the
yeah.
storage area
Yeah.
for the
Okay.
catch basin cleanings. Third one for road construction, again, $500,000. We've had a very good program in place. Again, normally we get that's anywhere from 6 to 8 streets a year done, depending upon the need. Again, they come in fast and furious, as you can probably imagine. And again, we try to, bundle them together as best we can. We kind of got caught this year in that they did a lot of water work over on Fairview and Laurel and Sylvan, so that really wasn't on our original plan to be out there. But the roads have, left in such a questionable condition that we decided we kind of move those up a little bit and going to do those next year. But normally we work with the water department, the gas company, and also we look at our priorities, what we have for our, based upon our list of, the most poor condition streets in town.
What did we do with that last year? We cut it down a little bit, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah,
But
'cause-
we also did it in the idea that we'd be getting complete streets money to some.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We're gonna have that big project coming in through. Was that, we get about 400,000 on that?
Yes, we
Yeah,
did. Last year we cut to 250.
Yeah, 250, yeah. On the next two are for dump trucks. Again, this is where I would like to start replacing at least a vehicle every year. Again, this one vehicle here, the first one, it's off the road. It's not going to pass. I can't use it. So again, this is very important during the winter. It's one of our salt trucks, so it's good to have that out there. Again, there's 2 of those in there. Ledge Road, again, this is kind of an oldie but a goodie that's been out there for a couple of years. Again, it's, we've been trying to get state money to help us out on this. But we haven't really, hasn't worked out well yet. So, but again, we're still trying to, get some sort of hazard mitigation money for this type of work.
John, just quick back on the dump truck. Did you say we're down one dump truck, or we can?
This one is the first dump truck is out of service.
Okay, so how many do we have right now for the salt?
We usually we have 4 we send out now, 4 to 5 depending upon what we're doing.
So we have 4 right now, or 3?
We have 4. We have
So
at least
4
Yeah.
that are.
Yeah.
Or operational?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's the effective number?
5 is good. I mean,
5.
And a little footnote to it, I know some of you may have seen these lines in the street this
I
past
did.
weekend.
Yeah.
I was just
That
gonna
was
ask
us
about
being
that.
proactive. That's as a brine product we put down to, hopefully save some money on salt and also have a, it's easy, good in that we can put it down the day or two before and it stays there. And it's actually better than salt because the salt will kind of, brush off as cars drive by. This will stay there, as you can see, for a day or two later. So it works out good.
Obviously, there's a lot of positive feedback for being proactive on that piece there. So did you see a positive? I know this is the one storm we used it.
Yeah, first time you
Positive
tried
result?
it, so I was, I'm sorry?
Was there a positive result that you think?
I thought so, yeah.
using
My
that?
guys did too, and I thought it worked
liked
out
it,
well,
yeah.
so.
That's great.
The next one, Hawksbrook drainage. This one actually you can probably cut in half, but we really need to start addressing this. Again, this is Hawksbrook, and it affects Timber Hill and what's the other one too? Fletcher, yes, Fletcher's the other one there too. So this is one of those where we've kind of brushed it aside for a while, but we're at a point now we're really going to have, not anything else, at least get to the culverts and replace those. So because it's getting worse, it's starting to affect the neighbors more. So. Again, I think the time probably has come to at least do something out there with those culverts.
Where's that located? Is that behind Timber Hill?
I think it's more adjacent to. Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. It eventually ends up kind of at 128, kind of back that way there. So it kind of meanders this way through that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, ongoing townwide drainage. Again, we have. That's essentially just a lot of catch basin work there. If we can do that, those usually usually one or two of those pop up every year.
Yeah.
So essentially, if they're damaged or they break, we have to get to them. And sometimes you find that they corrugated metal culverts. I mean, they don't last forever, and we're finding just they're destroyed. Sometimes we get down there. So the library fire alarm panel. This is actually probably the last request that we had sitting out there for the library out of the window and the bathroom doors and everything else there. So this is kind of the last thing out there, which again, we're able to get by without it, but I think we're getting to the point where we're going to want to consider replacing that. School buses, again, payment number 3 of 5, which has worked out well, Bluebird, so it's $35,000 a year. That's the cost for both buses to rent a year, which again, I think is a pretty reasonable amount. So in 2 more years, we'll own those. What this is up here, the funding for the VCT floor, there's some classrooms up there at Huckleberry on the backside, and the floor is essentially coming up, the tile floors, because the water comes down on the backside there. If you look in the back of some of those classrooms, the slope's down, it's all kind of ledge back there, and it's essentially getting underneath the foundation and kind of kicking up those tiles. So we're looking to probably in the spring go out there and kind of trench on the back, then try to do something. But we may have to do even more on the floors there to kind of make sure this doesn't keep coming up because it really ruins the floors. So, irrigation system at Huckleberry Hill School. We got it looks like we have the green light to essentially get water up there, tie into the system. So this would essentially complete that project. So we can tie in up there, and we can sod and irrigate that field, which kind of be probably the last field project you have out there out of. So
I think that was the end of it. And was there any? We've pretty much exhausted the funds in the field, or is this just a supplement?
this
what
is a
you have
supplement.
left?
Yeah, no, you're
Supplement what we have left. Okay.
yes. Concrete walkways at the high school. I mean, we had fortunately have a very good operations guy who took it upon himself to kind of manage a lot of the concrete blocks up at the high school last summer. He saved the town literally $30,000-$40,000 by doing that. So what I'm looking for here is just the balance of that to kind of finish off that work up there. There's still some panels more toward the left of the high school entranceway which need to be replaced. But once you get those done, you'll be pretty well set up there as far as the exterior concrete walkway goes.
Good.
Again, this is one for the high school. I had this in last year. Again, this is one of those where it's kind of sitting out there. We're kind of struggling to get through, but eventually it's going to rear its ugly head, and we'll have to replace it. But again, I just want to. It's out there that again every year it gets kind of creeping its way from medium to high, and just want to again make you aware of it that if it does go, it's going to come out of my budget. So I'd really like to avoid that if I could, but it is what it is too. I understand that. The next item here is that for the past few years, you folks have been very good about getting the custodians of the schools kind of an upgrade on some of their very old equipment they had up there. So this is kind of like the last piece to that request is just the next, yeah. This is kind of that last request for probably about $40,000-$50,000 worth of new equipment up there for essentially maintaining the different facilities. The man lift, again, this is one of those nice things to have. Again, low priority, it's out there. We have one now, but again, eventually that's probably going to have to be replaced. The high school, they're looking for new carpets. Again, what you have there now, it's not terrible, but again, at some point you may want to upgrade those. Again, another request for maintenance equipment for the actually the next three are all for, again, buffers, glosses for different custodians at the schools.
John, if I might just say this on that type of request, that's something I would say to my colleagues that I'm very much in favor of. As you go through the schools, those people do a great job. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah.
They really do. You walk in there, it looks like a new building, each one of them in town. And I think when people are doing a good job, if you don't give them the equipment, it really affects their performance, their morale. And where they're doing such a great job, if there's a need for that, we should really, make sure that's part of the budget.
So thank you. I think when you do things like that, you give them the equipment and such like that. I think they do recognize that you appreciate what they do, and it certainly makes their lives a lot easier too. Quite frankly, so you get a better product, I think, too.
Are these machines completely gone, or they're on their
They're on, I mean, some of them are. We had one that's a couple of these like these buffers. They're 15, 20 years old. So if they break down, you can't get parts for them.
Right.
That's the problem you have now. So they start borrowing them from different schools.
Yeah. But are the current machines still working at this point?
We have machines at all the schools that work, but sometimes we just you need two and you only have one.
Right.
So that's pretty much what it comes down to. You can send two guys out to do something rather than having to wait till this guy's done to start doing the work.
Okay.
So this certainly would allow them to be more effective.
Oh yeah.
I have to agree with Mr. Dalton on the custodians at the schools. My daughter's been playing basketball at the Summer Street School, and the lady who works at the Summer Street School at night is
Colleen?
absolutely outstanding.
Oh good.
Doesn't allow anybody to go down the hallway. and I tried to show my son where my old classroom was, and I said, I wish I had a custodian like you at my school. So they do a great job, so I would agree with that, Mr. Dalton.
If you got one more minute, I'll give you two quick updates on projects.
Sure.
The fitness room at the high school is essentially done. The decal should be in the last piece of the high school for the fitness room. The decal should be here and installed on Wednesday. On Friday, we're actually expanding the project a little bit. We're putting down rubber floor on we'll call it the dirt room, which is the left side of that room there, which is all concrete. You got about 7 or 8 pieces of equipment which you moved out of the fitness room. It's going to be down there, so you kind of expanding what you have there. So that's where all the muscle heads can go down that back room. So. And then if you've been out to Jordan Park, and that's actually going very well. I think we have a very good contractor out there. He's making relatively good progress considering how the weather has been. But again, it's so far so good out there. So
That's great. That's great, John. Appreciate it. I know we talked about hopefully expanding the playground area and doing a little more in the final design. So
yes,
it'd
yes.
be nice if when we get that going again in the spring. I'm sure it's going to be shutting down once we get some snow and ice. But he's still plugging along today, isn't he?
Yeah, he's. I mean, they pretty much have been out there. They've cleared the area there. They've pulverized the pavement. They've leveled a lot of the area there. Mm-hmm. So the next step is that they're going to start installing the drainage system there.
Yeah.
So and again, once the drainage system is done, they're pretty much as far as the budget goes, you're kind of on cruise control because there really should be no surprises with everything else. Because it's pretty straightforward. You're talking about a block wall, talking about playground equipment.
Did they find any unforeseen issues?
No.
No? Good.
No. Quite frankly, I was surprised.
Yeah.
I thought along the entranceway side, there was a lot of stones sticking up there, and I'm not sure if they were stones or ledge. They were all stones, so very fortunate as far as that goes.
I mean, when we dug up behind the high school, we found an old still from the early middle 1800s. So nothing like that back there, I guess. I guess that wasn't an old farm.
No.
Yes, Mrs. Campbell.
Street sweeper, I noticed that they were out this fall, at least one. And I asked you about it, and they had to clear the top of the drains, and there's a state regulation where you have to do that. So street sweeper, I think, was first on your list. Was it?
It's part of the
Is that-
NIPT's work, yes, it's part of the additional work you saw, that $80,000 is part of the new NIPT's
Right, right. So did we have to lease a street sweeper?
We have a contractor come in.
Uh-huh. So in the long run, this would save us money if we had our own. How long would it take?
The concern about sweepers is that, yes, you might save money as far as operations goes, but they're a bear to maintain at times, and that's the risk you run. Is that they tend to have there's Pelican, there's a bunch of other ones out there, and not that they're bad, but it seems like they're out of service a lot more than you would like when you need them, and when you need them, things have to get done. So the nice part about these contractors is that they usually have multiple vehicles, so if theirs breaks down, they get another one here the next day.
Okay. And also, is there do we have a mulcher that, that they can, like the big tree companies have, where you can put tree limbs in and it chops them up?
We have a small one.
You do?
Yes.
Okay, and that's okay for what we need when we have a windstorm, like you just
For
mentioned?
small things, we can probably do up to 5 to 6 inches diameter.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Great. John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
John, very professional presentation.
Oh,
Thank you.
John, thank you. Appreciate it.
Glenn, you've been waiting patiently. Glenn Davis, our fire chief. Got our operating budget and capital budget.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and rest of the board.
Good evening.
So I like the way John did that. I'm going to kind of do the same thing. And if I go right to my bottom line on my budget, I'm looking at about a 4% increase across my entire operating budget. That's fire expenses, emergency management, and the enterprise fund for the EMS. If we come back up to the top of that now, we look at firefighter salaries. Typical annual increase, we're looking at approximately 1.5% to 2% increase there across all those line items. The only one that jumps up at you there is the full-time overtime for shift work for the full-time career firefighters. That has been underfunded for several years. Similar to John, I've got 3 complete years under our new staffing plan to go back and look and see actual expenditures in this year's run rate. This year's run rate is on track with the exception of that line item. So that was underfunded, so I'm looking, we took a bite at it last year and I made up some of the underfunding last year. I didn't want to do it all in 1 year. I have another full year of run rate now and I know what that actual will be. And we're staying true to that this year. So that's a blip on the radar there. Call salaries, same, just the annual increase on that. My fire expenses, I kept level funded across the board there. Cut down into fire alarm expenses. There's a slight blip there on vehicle maintenance, 5% increase. I went from $2,100 to $2,250. It's an older vehicle. Every year we're doing a little bit more and more to maintain that and keep that in operation. That's the bucket truck that we use to maintain the fire alarm wires, anything hung on the poles. We use it for public works things. We hang the banners in town. So we utilize it for several other things through the town.
Chief, let me ask you this. I ask this every year.
Yes.
The fire alarms.
Yes.
With today's technology and so forth, I mean, I just could never envision myself using a pull firebox. And we spend a lot of money maintaining them and so forth, and everybody has cell phones and whatever. I mean, dialing 911 is
Correct.
just about instant, so.
So we don't spend a lot of money to maintain them, and we do take in some revenue from our master box fees. So any of those red boxes you see on all the buildings here throughout Market Street, any of the commercial properties, they pay a fee, which almost offsets our fire alarm budget with that revenue coming in for that. So it is older technology. It's very good technology. It's stable. Believe it or not, there are a few fires per year that still come in by people pulling a fire alarm box. It's used for other purposes too, any other motor vehicle accidents, things like that. People can pull that box for that. We do not rebuild them and replace them as they go out of service. So we're not, if one goes bad on one of the poles in one of the areas tomorrow, we take that out of the system so that the system is slowly getting a little bit smaller. Some communities have paid an expense to totally strip them out. I'm not at that point where I propose that. It's still a great system. It ties everything together from one end of the town to the other.
Chief,
Yes.
one question on the overtime piece.
Yes.
I know we've had a long-term vacancy in the department, and would that help offset this once you're back to full strength?
Somewhat.
On the overtime piece, somewhat?
Somewhat,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
I've had, as you know, an injured on duty claim that's going into the 7th year. We're
Yep.
working on that one.
Yep.
And I have another injured on duty right now that's been out since October. So
Okay.
those do create increases there. I'm paying that person and I have to backfill the spot.
Right. And those are, and most of the time that's unforeseen,
Correct.
particularly the newest one.
Absolutely,
Obviously.
correct.
So once we get hopefully back to a full strength, that'll offset some of that overtime.
Correct.
And you said last year, because there wasn't any adjustment to your budget, you've made moves to make it work for last year, but this year you're fully funded?
I believe we did have
Yeah.
a small transfer in to offset that under budgeted line item last year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on what you just said, and again, I don't want to get into individual cases, but if we have someone on leave into their 7th year, that seems extraordinary to me, that we as a town are still in that position. So I guess I would ask both you and the town administrator, and maybe, it's something for executive session, I don't know, but it's something that has to be addressed.
I would advise that we talk about it in executive session.
It's still ongoing, so that's why I think we have to talk about executive session. Yeah, okay. Great.
We come down into call firefighter expenses, again, just a typical annual increase in the salary line items across the board. Fire alarm, as I said, very small increase there. Total fire expenses, level funded for all of the individual line items. Emergency management remains level funded going into year 2 on that under my leadership. Emergency medical services, again, bottom line under the EMS fund is a 2% increase. There's a couple small little blips there you can see. One item under other professional services, I'm looking to break that out a little bit more easy to understand. That involves the medical director that we contract with to oversee our medical services. Licenses for the ambulance, we have more paramedics than we've ever had. So annually and under the collective bargaining agreement, we afford the opportunity for people to go to paramedic school. We have a reimbursement program for that comes out of this fund, and in turn they agree to work for us for a minimum period of time after they achieve their paramedic. We're up to 17 paramedics on the department now, which is more than we've had. That's what we kind of promised the state Office of Emergency Medical Services years ago when we undertook the ALS service, that we would grow our program, continue with the education of the people to be able to provide that service level.
Can you just tell me about the medical director and
Sure.
what that entails, what it
Yep.
costs us?
So anytime we go out and do a medical call, any of the treatment that we provide is provided under the license and direction of our associate medical director. We contract and have contracted for about the last 7 or 8 years with Dr. Bennett Shamshai. He's a physician with Partners, and he provides that medical oversight. He looks over our entire ambulance program, our procedures, our protocols, our ability to deliver certain medications. Every time we give a medication in the field, it's actually under his license, so he oversees everything that we do.
Thank you.
Any questions on the expense budget operations?
Have you been happy with the collections on the
Enterprise?
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I know that was an improvement. Is it still, you still seeing it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been very favorable with Pro EMS.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a good process. They collect more than the prior company did, and it's been a good change for us.
Great, great. Thank you. Sure.
Capital budget. I don't know what you have for a printout in front of you, but I'm going to start with the top of my pile. The first is personal protective equipment turnout gear.
That's what we have. Yeah.
Okay, very good. The request for that is $111,000. The reason that we are in the position that we are is a majority of our turnout gear, most of it, was purchased 10 years ago on an Assistance to Firefighters grant. It was grant money, and the lifespan of that gear is 10 years. So most of it is coming due next year. We do annual replacements. The annual replacements, so the cost to outfit a firefighter is just shy of $4,000. This is the helmet, gloves, coat, pants, boots. That's the full ensemble to outfit a firefighter. The life expectancy, as I said, is 10 years. We're getting to that point, so we need to be able to replace that. I want to get on a better, stronger annual replacement process, and that's the goal with this. I've got it marched out for the next 10 fiscal years, where once we get caught up on this, if we buy a larger portion every year and get on a planned placement recycle, we won't be hitting this again with a large expenditure.
So just, so to follow up on that, so
Yes.
you would propose 111,000 for this fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year.
Correct.
So then what are you saying in the following fiscal year, if you had to estimate now?
To carry on and continue on that replacement to keep everybody in a current set of gear would be approximately $40,000 per year ongoing on an annual basis to keep up with that, depending on cost of the equipment going up with an anticipated every year, another percent increase in cost.
And so that would be churning over what percentage then?
About 10 sets per year to get there. So that would allow us to stay ahead of the curve on the 10-year cycle of that gear. The goal in the fire service is to get every firefighter 2 sets of gear. We don't have that at this point with the cancer initiative. Every time you get a set dirty, you need to be able to change that and clean it. We're working down that pathway really well. In the past couple of capital budgets, we were able to purchase a couple of extractors, which is the wash. And so we're ahead of some of the local fire departments with that. Thanks to your support, we are able to properly clean our gear now and get it back in service fairly quickly.
Is that what you're getting at, Dick, why there was so many? Is that what you're getting at, why there was so many?
Right.
Yeah, because I was looking at it and go, that doesn't add up number-wise.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I was going to turn it to Pat and get the answer from her.
The second is the self-contained breathing apparatus. This is the big hit. Again, all of our breathing apparatus was purchased 10 years ago on a Assistance to Firefighters grant. This is a federal grant through FEMA for firefighter funding. We purchased all of our SCBA actually 9 years ago now. Next year is year 10. It all comes to its expiration cycle. Based on that, and the reason that it's difficult to replace these on a small portion going forward is these different than turnout gear. If my coat is different than your coat and different than the next guy's coat on a yearly cycle, that's not a big deal. Breathing apparatus, they all have to match each other so that at 2 a.m, if I need to disconnect my face piece and connect to somebody else, it has to match, it has to be on the same cycle, and it has to be the same apparatus, if you will. So these do need to all match each other throughout the department for interoperability amongst ourselves. We have $65,000 from a prior capital year. That's figured into this. The total cost would be $345,000 for all of this gear. With that $65,000, we put towards that, and the request is $280,000. This will be an AFG grant request this year. The grant period has not opened yet. I anticipate that to open in the next 14 to 21 days. If we are successful in that grant request, we were not last year and we were not the year before. These are needs-based grants, so they base it on the demographics of the department, the size of the department, and tax income to the town. If we are successful this year and we also fund it through the capital process, AFG will reimburse the town for the money spent. I've confirmed that with the process, and that is true.
So they replace 100%?
100%, yeah, correct.
So are these replacements mandatory? And I say mandatory, you know, it's comes down from whomever.
Yes, so these are actually mandated by a couple reasons. OSHA, we are now an OSHA state in Massachusetts, so occupational safe and health awareness. They look at respiratory protection, and this is one of their big focus areas is this. NFPA also states 10 years or 3 code cycles of the equipment, and we've hit both of those. So NFPA comes out with new regulations, new requirements for this apparatus that it has to meet certain specifications, and we are 3 cycles behind, and next year is year 10 where they would expire. The bottles themselves fall under DOT regulations, Department of Transportation. The bottles will no longer be able to be filled once they hit that 10-year mark and actually be placed in a vehicle to transport across the road. So under DOT regulations also, we would not be able to continue to use the bottles.
So it's pretty much required.
It's required.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. The next request would be for a replacement command vehicle that would replace Car 1, which is the vehicle I'm currently driving, which is a 2017 F-150. Relatively new, I understand that, but the purpose when that was purchased was to rotate that down into the fleet and replace some of the aging apparatus. We have a Chevy pickup truck that is a 2000, has 160,000 miles on it, and a rotted frame that is not repairable. That's currently parked at South Fire. That was requested last year. That's been out of service for a little bit over a year, so that's been out of service. Our other 2 vehicles, we're looking at a 2008 Ford Explorer that has over 130,000 miles on it. That has some current mechanical issues. It's getting more costly to maintain that. These are vehicles that we utilize throughout the day for paramedics to be able to respond to calls across town for different medical calls and things like that. So the command vehicle would rotate down into that staff of vehicles, and that would replace the Car 1. The next request is for the radio site replacement. This is year 5 of 5. This is the joint request with the police department. This is the ongoing project to replace all of our copper wiring in the radio system with fiber optic. We're progressing well on that project. This is year 5 that should complete all of the fiber runs from the towers into the stations themselves and complete that project. The next is another joint request with the police department. This is for the KeyScan security system. This is the system with the fobs to get in and out of the stations and other various places in the fire stations, whether we're securing medications with the fobs so that you can track access. This system is more than 10 years old. It will not function and operate on the Windows 10 operating system, which most of the equipment in town is finally being upgraded to, which is great. So that's an essential to secure the station. Information technology, again, we're looking to upgrade a bunch of our PCs to the Windows 10 platform. Some of the older devices that we have in the station in various places just won't support the upgrade to Windows 10, and Windows 7 is not going to be supported anymore. Portable and mobile radio replacement. This is an ongoing process. As we purchase mobile radios and portable radios, the portables are what the firefighters carry. This is planned replacement cost over the years. Again, projected useful life is approximately 8 to 12 years on these based on technology changes. And with the upgrade to our infrastructure of the radio system, this allows us to keep current, and all members have a radio issued to them. Our Jaws of Life, the extrication tools, that's the acronym that people use. There's actually several brand names of extrication equipment out there. We currently have two sets. We have a new set that was purchased several years ago that is deployed out of South Station on engine 1. That is the newer of the set, which is what referred to as electronic hydraulic or e-hydraulic. They're not connected to a hydraulic anymore. They're battery powered, similar to your DeWalt cordless drill at home. Very powerful, much more mobile and versatile. The set that runs out of fire headquarters on engine 2 is a set that is approximately 20 years old. It was moved on to engine 2 when we purchased engine 2, so they were repurposed. We've had several failures over the past year with components of that. And again, at the 20-year age level, it's difficult to find parts to keep those operating. The next is a fire engine, a pumper. This is a very large request. I understand that. It was requested last year and the year prior. Again, it was requested through the Assistance to Firefighters grant. We were not successful last year based on the ages of our apparatus. I feel a little more hopeful this year as our apparatus is a little more aging. I will be submitting for another grant for that to replace that fire engine. The one we're looking to replace is our engine 4, which was manufactured in 1984. It's approximately 36 years old. It does have mechanical issues with it. I understand it's a large request, and when it comes down to safety and equipment, that is already well prioritized above the fire engine. I understand that. Yes, sir.
Clear, Chief.
Yes.
That we have two pumpers that are in tremendous shape.
Yep.
Ready to go, as well as a ladder truck, that this is the backup pumper to be used if something happens to
Correct.
one of those.
It's the third due engine company to an incident.
Right.
Correct.
And the normal process is two pumpers and a ladder. I just don't want people to think
Absolutely.
that we're using a
Yep.
truck that's not.
Yep. It's just to maintain the current fleet that we have, that would be a request for that. Correct. Our frontline engines, as we know, we bought a new engine 1 in 2017. So that's our newest of the frontline apparatus. That's engine 1 running out of South Station. The next two older engines are engine 2 and engine 3, which are sister engines. They were purchased at the same time in 2004. So that's the status of the fire equipment. The next is a upgrade to the telecommunication system, the phone systems. Again, this is a joint request with the police department. The system is 20 plus years old. We've had several failures of the internal phone systems over the past year in particular. We're not all on the same platform, and being able to communicate with each other with intercom capabilities, and it's just an aging system. The new system would give us much more mailbox functionality to be able to leave messages and all of that.
Great.
And that is my capital budget. Any questions on that?
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. My fellow board members, any questions on it?
No.
No?
Chief, thank you.
Any questions? No?
Well, one is. One is that very loud at 12 noon and 7 p.m. And if you're in front of the library, it could cause a heart attack. It's a good thing you're right across the street. There was a young man there one day when I was pulling up to the post office. He almost ran over the curb. And when he got out, he said, "What was that?" So, do we really need those? And how much do they cost to keep?
So they cost very little to maintain. It is our backup to our paging system. It's been in place for years and years and years. That is a daily test of that system. It's a compressed air horn, and it's tied into the system. So if we have a complete fail-safe of our pagers and radio system during a major power failure, that would still work because it is air-powered. And believe it or not, as recently as a year ago, we've had firefighters actually respond to the station in response to hearing that horn blow because their pagers did not function for whatever reason. So it does still function. I understand it's loud at times when you're not expecting it, but it does serve a purpose and it does function.
The protective breathing equipment,
Yes.
does that protect our firefighters from fumes such as were found at 911, the World Trade Center? To what extent does that protect them?
Yes, it does. So, yes, they're finding things today that they were exposed to there that they thought were safe at the time, and they were working without this breathing apparatus on for a lot of the time. Yes, these protect us against most things, airborne, anything, whether it be fire, smoke, some chemical exposure, not all, because sometimes the chemical can actually affect the rubber on the mask. So there's certain things that we won't enter either, and that's when we would call the hazmat team, and they have special apparatus for that. This would protect us from most things that we would see here in town.
Okay. I didn't quite, Mr. Dalton asked you about the replacing 10-year, shoot, what page am I on here? The one that you spoke of as being cyclical, and it was 400,000, I think. And then next year you were anticipating that you would have another 40,000. Well, we already have that year. We already have replaced all of the equipment. And so the next year, would that really be valid? It would only be 1 year old, right? I didn't quite understand that.
So the first year's request would not be replacing every set of turnout gear that we currently have. That would replace approximately 45 sets of turnout gear, which still leaves some that would be expiring in the next year and then the following fiscal year. So over the next 10 years, we would continuously have anywhere from 5 to 8 sets of gear still expiring because we have been doing some planned replacement. Not enough to keep up with it, which is why we're behind the 8 ball now. Each year I've been getting approximately $15,000 to $16,000 in capital money for these, but at $4,000 per turnout set, it doesn't replace enough each year to get ahead of that curve. That help?
Okay. Yeah, it does. Thank you. When we write for these grants, do we point out to the people that we're writing to, that we haven't received grants? Is it like our turn to get the grants?
Unfortunately, it's not turn-based, they're needs-based grants. So it's how well
Okay.
you write the grant, but a lot of it comes down to demographics of the city or town that you live in, as well as the age of the equipment. I know several departments last year that received, just for instance, a fire engine grant, and the age of the vehicle they were replacing was probably 8 to 10 years older than the one we're looking to replace. So they are needs-based. Every
Okay.
year that you get delayed on being fulfilled on a request kind of moves you up on the list, hopefully. But
Okay.
So then our strategy should be to delay as long as we can so that we can get the maximum grants.
for some things possibly, but for safety and the other items that expire, no.
Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chief.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Great job.
And now we'll get a rousing update from our town administrator.
I'm going to take the podium. So happy to say that I'm very happy where we are mid-year in the fiscal year. We've met all our revenue assumptions, and I'd like to just go over briefly with you some of the items that you see in front of you that might be over 50%. We're at the halfway point of our fiscal year. So in the Selectmen line item, property liability insurance, as well as the Selectmen expenses, the property and liability insurance, if we pay it the first day of the fiscal year, we receive a discount, so we pay that. Selectmen other expenses include Mass Municipal, MAPC, and the various organizations that we belong to. If you pay the dues are due in the first few months, you also get a discount. On the next page, under the Board of Assessors, under the assessment professional services, it's 100%. That is Patriot Properties, and that is paid at the beginning of the fiscal year for the entire year. Under the treasurer's salaries, we're at 60%. With the retirement of our treasurer, that required some payout in terms of her vacation and pay and sick, whatever she was entitled to, and that reflects that payment. And as you know now, we have a new assessor, a new treasurer, as well as a new assessor. Going to the third page, everything is in order until you get to the city town clerk. Again, with Trudy leaving, that we had to pay out her our obligation to her, and that's reflected at 55%. Again, we have a new town clerk that will be starting on February 4th, who's currently leaving the town of Rockport. We're very happy to have her.
And that salary for the town clerk's about 80, was it 80,000?
Yeah. On the next page, you see a lot of building maintenance. There's a lot of costs that are happen throughout the year, but as a whole, that municipal building budget is only at 41.9%, so I'm not concerned there. Under police, although overtime is at 58%, I'm not particularly concerned with that, considering we have 2 officers that are unable to work at this time, so I think we are doing well there. And other expenses is slightly over, and that's basically anything else in the department that the chief may need. That's pretty much on target. Okay, alarm expenses, again, chief, that's work that we do beginning of the fiscal year, and light work the second half. That takes us down to the vocational school assessment. That is paid in quick quarterly payments. That reflects the third payment, so we are up to date on the vocational school. So again, as Mr. Tomaz said, we are behind on snow and ice. However, we do have a capacity of $270,000 to cover this fiscal year. Again, the storms that we've had, they haven't been many, but they've been multi-day storms that have been particularly expensive. The next page on Council on Aging, slight 58%. A lot of their activities happened in the first half of the fiscal year. Same as the veterans, with Veterans Day as being a major expense. Both those departments are going to meet their budgetary obligations. And then our prevention services, as you know, we had to fund Peg Saladay's salary through October, but now due to the good work of herself and our Healthy Lynnfield, we now have several grants in which all of her salary, as well as several other programs, will be paid for by that grant, so we won't be seeing that next fiscal year. So that sums up. Again, one more, workers' comp payment, again, paid for the first day of the fiscal year, you get a discount. In terms of the enterprise fund, that's the capital, that's the operations budget. In terms of the capital, we've collected 52% on our ambulance. That's really good, considering that with the closing of Union, that has created extra burden in terms of more runs, more money. But the chief is managing that well. And I'm happy to report in golf that we have spent 54% of our budget, but we have already brought in 74% of our revenue assumptions already. So we should finish very, very strong with golf next fiscal year. So that is the state of the town's budget at the halfway point.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next item is the adoption of the 2020 mileage reimbursement for employees. It's the 2020 reimbursement went down 0.5 cent. I don't know if we need to talk about it any more than that. So I'll take a motion.
I move that the board vote to adopt 57.5 cents per mile as a reimbursement rate for town employees using their personal vehicles for town business effective January 1, 2020.
Second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Town administrator, the update for the projects in town.
Great. Department quarterly reports, we're happy to state that the next meeting, we're going to have our new assessor come and make an appearance in front of the Board of Assessors and in front of the Board of Selectmen to talk a little bit about his goals.
Please turn on your microphone.
We not only did the mid-year budget review, Julie and I, to the Board of Selectmen tonight, but we also presented in front of the FinCom. I feel very confident that we will have a contract with World Tech in the next week to 10 days. I met with Mr. Mayo from Wakefield, and we're going to be meeting this weekend at the Mass Municipal Convention with the CEO of World Tech, and we feel very close for a contract to proceed with the rail trail project. We, under Strategic Planning Committee, we have hired the Giorgio Architects have been hired to prepare a report on public safety facility options. We're happy that they have a wide breadth of experience in public safety options and helping communities get the options before the public. Also, I had a pretty thorough review of the library budget estimates and whether or not they're holding with the current climate, and I feel confident that they are holding. I think they've done a very good job in terms of escalation and as well as contingency on both of those projects. King Rail Clubhouse, we met with WS here at Market Street. We will need a sewer hookup. They feel confident and are willing to help us with a sewer hookup if the town agrees to invest in a new clubhouse at King Rail. As we know, we have money allocated within the real estate accounts that was set aside for golf. We have decided to work towards a new golf clubhouse and some site work and some beautification of that area. We had a very productive meeting. The chairman was with us today with the architect, and I think we have a good project right now that we feel that is in our budget, and hopefully we'll be presenting it to the town. Jordan Park, as Mr. Thomas said, they've gotten a lot of work done because of the lack of snow. School enrollment capacity. Tepe Associates, the architectural firm hired by the School Space and Facility Study Committee, is just about completed his responsibilities in presenting options and review of current space in our schools. Also, that same committee, chaired by Mr. Shenna, is ready to make their recommendation at their next meeting in, I believe it's February 14th. So that is both of those, the study as well as possible solutions will be presented to the public and to the school committee.
That's February 12th, I think.
February 12th, thanks, Chris.
I get a date on that night, Valentine's Day.
Wow, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a Friday night either.
That's right.
You know, John has that much of a life. Finishing up. The Summer Street TIP program, we met with the Department of Transportation, and we have come up with if we are to proceed forward in the Summer Street TIP, a 6 to 7 year payment plan in order to meet our responsibilities for that project. And as High School Fitness Center is just about complete, and I already talked about the town clerk starting. So that is the completion of my report.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. Next item tonight is as we did last year, we have the option to extend the town administrator's contract for another year out, which will bring 2 years out from now, and I can't tell you how. I guess I can tell you what a great job Rob has done. He's already met all the goals we set for him this year, and he's done a fantastic job. So I would like to propose that we do a second amendment to his contract. We roll it out for a second term, give him the 1.5 increase that we've given other town employees, and make him eligible for the inclusion in the incentive program we have for department heads, and roll him out for another 2 years. I would propose that and bring it in front of the board for consideration.
Phil, I would agree. I think, Rob, since day one, you really hit the ground running. The goals certainly have been effective, and the goals we set for you, the town of Lynnfield is in great hands. Certainly makes our job a whole lot easier. And I think this is worthy, earned, and I know we're restricted to 2 years because of the town charter, I believe. on that. It's because I would look to secure you for years beyond that. But thank you for all you do for the town of Lynnfield.
I'd just like to echo what Chris has just said. I think since Rob has come on board, he has made the Board of Selectmen all that much more effective. He's there for us, as you can see. He gives his updates at each meeting, but in addition, every Friday he gives us an update as to what went on that week, what we can expect in the coming week, and I think he has brought a level of professionalism to the job that I certainly appreciate, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well. So, Rob, I think it's been an outstanding job that you've done for the town, and I commend you for all your hard work and commitment.
I appreciate it. If I may, I just want to thank the Board of Selectmen for their consideration. It's been an absolute joy over my 2 years. We have formed a great team, both with the selectmen and the department heads, led by myself and Bob Curtin, who is an incredible institution, not institutional, but institution in this town, as well as the great employees and the citizens have been really welcoming to me. So thank you for your kind words.
Well, with that said, I'll take a motion from my board members.
I move that the board vote to approve the second amendment to the town administrator's contract as presented.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Rob, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we are now going to enter into executive session under Mass Chapter General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss collective bargaining strategy with the union personnel for which an open discussion may adversely affect the town's negotiating position.
So moved.
A roll call vote. Selectman Barrett?
Aye.
Selectman Dalton?
Aye.
And Selectman Crawford? Aye. We will not be resuming to open session, so good night and thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you all.